All right, Paul. So I'm really just glad that you said you were open to this conversation overall. I'm excited to dive in and jump in a little bit. I have no clue where this is going to go. I actually just had my first conversation with someone just before here, and so now questions are starting to formulate and such. But more than anything else, I want to leave this as a place for the two of us to both be able to explore, for the two of us to both be able to be big, to be able to be messy, and to honestly just take on a topic that, if I'm going to be real, for the last year and a half has been on my mind, and for to be really real, for years. This has been, I haven't wanted to deal anything with diversity and inclusion for the longest, and some things have been coming up recently where I'm like, I'm tired of talking about the fact that things feel off. I want to do something about it, and I'm realizing that for me, I'm feeling not ill-equipped, but I'm just like, I feel like I'm a little bit out of the nexus of the conversation, and to see like what really needs to be talked about here, and why aren't we talking about it? So I can solve for both and create a whole lot of experiences around that. So that's generally what's on my mind here. I love to give you as much space as possible. There are like a few, like there's three things right off the bat that I just want to just like enter into an agreement with you on, to get it started. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right, cool. So the first thing here, and like, look, you can say yes or no to any of this here. It's going to change the way that I show up, but like, it doesn't, like, it really should just be either one of the options is fine. I just want to know where my boundaries are. Okay. Cool. So the first thing is that like, I'm going to hide nothing and hold nothing back throughout this conversation. Right. And I think where that shows up is I want to get personal. I'm willing to allow myself to get messy. I'm willing to have someone reach out to me and be like, Nemo, what were you talking about? Like, no, because otherwise, yeah, I'm willing to go there. But I'm taking on that. I'm going to hide nothing, hold nothing back. You don't have to come in the same way. Are you comfortable? I may also ask questions that like,
I'm in.
Like, okay, cool. I just wanted to say, all right, I'm hiding nothing, hold nothing back. The second thing is that like, I'm choosing to serve rather than please throughout this entire conversation. I don't want to go to the safe places. I want to explore the unknown, and do it in a place of service versus a place of looking good or making other people feel good. I have to say that because that also might mean making you feel good. Is that something that you're okay with?
I am completely okay with that. I don't want you to make me feel good.
All right, cool. I'll take that. The third thing is like, look, I think this can be a life-changing conversation. In fact, at this point in my life, I refuse to have anything less than a life-changing conversation. I have a track record of it. Are you open to this being a life-changing conversation in some way?
I am.
All right, cool. All right, I think that's really all that I really need. The only other thing I would say is that throughout the conversation, I'm going to lead it, but you're in control. Right. So I'll take it where I think it can go, but like you ultimately have control of where we go in this conversation. Don't go anywhere that you don't feel comfortable. And if you feel like we're taking it too light, like turn up the intensity and take us to some place that'll be really juicy for you. Sound good?
That works for me.
All right, cool. So let's start this off here, maybe with like just a set of like having a similar like palette to start from. And the question that comes to mind here is like, we're talking about inclusion. This whole thing kind of stemmed off this post that I sent out there around really a question of why does inclusion feel so exclusive? It's like so dangerous. Like like there seems to be like a right way or a wrong way to talk about things related to inclusion. There's like a way that you should be in conversation. That's how it feels like to me. And I'll probably talk more about this as our conversation goes on. And I really think this can be a conversation versus like an interview, back and forth and all that. And I want to like, that's the premise that brought us into this conversation. Where we go, we'll just see. We'll just see where things go from there. What I think would be really interesting to explore first and foremost is like, for you in this current moment right now, like how would you define like what inclusion really and truly is and what it might look like?
Yeah, that is a good question. I was actually reading something yesterday and it was talking about a sense of belonging. I think this person had left the corporate world after the loss of his brother. And he was talking about community and trying to figure out what community is, right? And his conception originally was that community is the people that take care of you or drop off a lasagna when you're sick, right? And through his journey, pain, suffering, what he discovered was that, and he talked to he cited some research around this, is that in actually to belong, you need to be mutually dependable, right? So it's not just being able to be helped, which is hard for people just to start with, but also helping other people, right? So there needs to be that reciprocal relationship, and that's kind of foundational for a sense of belonging. So I think at the core level, that's how I would think about inclusion. I think in context of this discussion, I think what is happening and why you might be feeling off is that this is a very complex thing when applied to organizations or our modern world. That tends to get talked about in a very simple conversation. And like, if you're going to break down a complex problem, it takes a complex conversation, probably several hours, right? And it's painful and it's hard and it's confusing and it forces you to define your terms. So I think that's where a lot of the discomfort comes from.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Like, let me start off here with just belonging and mutual dependency. That's the first time that I've heard about that. And belonging is something that is really at the core of everything that I do nowadays. And it's interesting because it's like I feel a stronger tied to belonging than to inclusion. So it's actually really interesting that you brought that up, and how they all come together.
I think where a lot of this, I think where I started to pay attention to this a couple of years ago was, I think a lot of it was overlapping with a political sentiment that was probably rightly driven, that was getting layered on top of the workplace. And I've studied the organizational complexity of workplaces for years. And I think some of my alarms started going off because I realized when people were talking about X, they really were often missing sometimes that foundational element Y wasn't being considered, right? And this is where I started looking at the complexity. And a lot of people are talking about diversity in terms of numbers. And like, diversity is impossible given base level condition Y that we talked about already, right? And some of these things are basic, like a modern organization is centrally controlled at the top, from people with power, and people are told what to do, right? And then we're trying to layer this ideal of individual equality onto these environments. And that's just utter craziness, right? So then whatever suboptimal solution you're coming to within that framework is going to feel really terrible. Or it's just at bare minimum, it's just going to call attention to the fact that everything is a little messed up, which gets to a broader conversation about workplace transformation. But I think some of these things around diversity, inclusion, belonging are really kind of leading indicators of a deeper pain in the way we're structuring modern organizations and society.
Yeah. So I am now insanely curious about this year. Like, let me rephrase that. Like, I'm just really, really curious. Like, because this is a newer aspect to me here. When you talk about the way that our organizations are structured. So how is it that the structure of our organizations might be leading toward us not being able to have the conversations around or taking approaches to inclusion that can actually lead to the results that are actually desired?
Well, I think I'd actually step back here, right? Like, what are we talking about when we're talking about diversity? What are we talking about when we're talking about the purpose of an organization. Like, how would you define the purpose of an organization?
Yeah. Okay.
And let's constrain it to modern for-profit work organizations. Like, what is the purpose of an organization?
Yeah. So the way that I would use an organization, especially one that's for profit, is one that returns. I look at it in terms of it's able to provide value to shareholders, right? Like that's the definition that I look at, like an organization that can continue in perpetuity to manage and leverage resources from one state of existence to a higher state in order to return value to the shareholders of that organization.
Yeah, so even there, so I'm going to make this conversation really complex.
Yeah, let's go.
That you're saying the purpose of an organization is to maximize shareholder value, right? That is the central belief. Most people think that's actually a legal requirement. It's not. That idea of an organization that it should maximize shareholder value, as early as like the 1950s, that was seen as an absurd idea, right? An organization was seen as something that should like benefit all stakeholders, employees, shareholders, and customers, and like the local communities. That was seen as the sensible reason. Now this has shifted in the last 50 years. And people, if we're saying this, right, we're saying that the purpose of an organization is not to create diverse teams, right? So there we have a foundational disconnect. Like if the purpose is to maximize shareholder value, we have plenty of evidence showing that like diverse teams do lead to maximizing shareholder value. But I'm sure in some contexts, the best decision might be to limit diversity so that you're mirroring exactly the market you're serving, right? And I only call this out to like try to gain more transparency about like what we're really talking about here, right? And this is why some of these things are so hard. So I don't think it's worth it, like diving too deep into the purpose role. But let's say we define the purpose of an organization to like cultivate like great teams, right? To do great work or like keep the firm alive, right? And even then, like if that's the goal, like in the back of everyone's mind, that is the goal, right? So when it comes to like doing what's right through a diversity lens, you might not actually be doing what's right for the company. And that's at a high level, right? And then if we take it down another level, like we then have the problem of defining performance, which is just another black box. People think they know how to define their performance, but like think back to some of your work you did. Like did you ever have the experience where you felt like you did great work and somebody else was like not a good 6 months?
Yeah. I can laugh about it now, but like at the moment, right. not so much.
But reflecting back now, like, are you even really sure who is right?
I mean, I'm inclined to think I was right. I'm not gonna lie. I'm inclined to think, but yeah, I'm following where you're coming from on this one.
Right, and performance may not actually mean do the best work. It may mean do the work that is the least obstructive to the internal organization, right? That is the smoothest possible work that keeps the organization alive, right? The least risky for like pushing the organization in a change direction, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you say this, it's get in my mind to actually think about like performance as a show, you know, as a form of entertainment. Like there's a way that you're supposed to perform and
right.
Like, so I hadn't thought of it. I don't want to derail it, but I hadn't thought of it in that kind of like lens of like whenever I hear performance in the, you know, the work context, I've always thought of it in terms of like output and execution. But as you're even challenging what does performance mean, it's actually making me think beyond just how I would say how much fidelity is in that word as it is.
Right. And we can tie this back, right? So now we're talking about diversity. And what do most organizations mean for diversity? They mean diverse candidates once you've met a certain bar of credentials, or looking and talking like me. Now, I say this because there's a lot of pushback about like the boring old white man, right, in the big organizations, but it's also true. Like, it was the majority of the workers, and like what these organizations are optimizing around was like basically keep continuing to build comfortable organizations, right, where you could extract wealth from the top. And I guess somebody like me, I actually didn't fit that mold. I may look like I fit the mold, but I was raised by parents who were not like prestige seeking. They were blue collar. We lived in a small, humble town, and I wasn't raised around people that went to fancy colleges or did fancy jobs. So when I got in the workforce, I had all sorts of people telling me, that's not how you dress, that's not how you talk, you should walk like this. And perhaps like I got through the door because they're like, oh, you kind of look like us. But this is a lot of what we're talking about, right? So like, it's almost like we're pretending. I think some companies really do understand diversity and diversity of ideas and diversity of backgrounds and diversity of perspective, right? Some companies are doing a really good job. And like, I think generally the increased awareness has been a net great thing. Like, I've worked in some really diverse teams, and like the work was so fun, and like we did such great work. And I think like undoubtedly diversity played a role in that. But when we're only talking about people that have like the right degrees or like can act the right way, that's not actually diversity. So I think we should be more honest with what we're actually trying to optimize around.
So this is putting a smile on my face here, mainly because I feel like there's a lot of places to explore with this here. So, and I think for this conversation, I would love to even just start employing some of what you're talking about right now for the two of us to align, right? Because it's very interesting is that, and I admit, like, I'm coming here to explore this and learn more about this myself. So I'm gonna let you know some of my thoughts and see where we can go from there. Part of the reason why I feel that the current approach to diversity and inclusion feels so off to me. And I actually need to preface this first thing here because in hiding nothing to hold nothing back, I wanted to state like, I think that the work that is being done right now is important work, and it's great that it can be done on a mainstream level, you know. For sure. I think that there's nothing in me, and it's actually really interesting because it took me a couple of years to get to this point, but there's nothing in me to say like, no, like stop doing like, you know, Women's Day or like Black, like it's not about that. I think that to me, the way that it feels that they're all done in individual silos right now, though, right? It's almost like an organization. Right. Like, it just feels like there's just like a silo, and part of the reason this comes up for me is I'm like, we talk about inclusion, but like the approach feels like, you know,
everything else organizations.
Exactly, right. So it's like I'm down for inclusion. Like Black excellence is different from that for me, or feminism is different for that. That's a different thing for me. And there's something around like going to like an event that was tailored to women, or like they were like had like a women's theme, and wanted to really be an active participant within it, and knowing that there was actually very little space for me to be anything other than an observer, and then to go back and like evangelize. At least that's the way that things have been constructed, right? And that's what felt incredibly exclusive. Where I'm like, hold on,
right?
I believe in this. This is my 5th strength on Gallup Strength Fighter. like I believe in inclusion, and this doesn't feel it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never even been to a single event in my whole career.
Yeah, see, like it feels off.
I literally can't go.
Tell me more. No, because I don't know this experience. So like tell me more.
I would feel terrified to like even ask can I go to this event, right? Like, I worked for like big companies. They weren't like the most like cutting edge, like some of the tech companies. Like, there were diversity events and stuff, but like I just can't go. It's kind of like an unspoken thing. Like, you're a white dude, like, and I do have advantages, but I can't go to those events.
And this is the reason why I wanted to have this conversation, right? This is the reason why I want to look at this here, because like there's elements in here where it feels like the entire, like the structure feels off if this is the way that if this is the environment that's being created. It's almost as if it's like, but my goal would be like to make sure that at the end of this, if we look at like the vision of what this looks like at the end, it isn't another version with someone else sitting at the top, right? Which is
Right.
like it almost feels like there's like a race going on where it's like,
Well, that's the whole thing, right? That is like, these are like, a modern organization is an oppressive hierarchy. No matter who's at the top will be in some form oppressing the people below them. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a frog CEO. Like, that frog will be controlling and manipulating the like butterflies that are working for them, right?
keep going, keep this analogy going too. Or I don't know if it's a metaphor, but keep this going.
I'm just making it like very abstract to kind of just make a point, right? Like, I think too many times in the business world, nobody talks about the real game being played. The games being played are power games. It is who has power, who has resources, who has the money, who has control, who can hire people, who can fire people, who can give raises, right? Everyone kind of knows that's the game being played. Like, it's not, modern organizations are not equality, like, they're not places of equality. So things are going to feel icky no matter which direction we put this stuff. Now, like, organizations, like, it's in their own best interest to become more diverse. Like, and I think what's happening is you're seeing things become more networked, right? And some people have even said like a more networked world is going to dramatically empower women. And like, that may be true. Like 50 years from now, it may just be that many more women are in control of modern organizations, right? And I don't want to go too deep with this, but like,
go as deep as you want, and just so you know, however deep you go, Paul, like I'll dive with you. In fact, I'm happy to go deep on that myself, where it's like, you know, I look at it and say, like, in my mind, the thing about this is that there's almost like one solution. If we're really playing, if the real goal, and I like what you're saying, where you're like, the goal itself may not be to really have inclusion, like to have inclusive workplaces. It might still be what an organization is actually all about. If for now we say, like, if the real goal was to have these inclusive workplaces so we can get as a pathway to get to the end goal of the organization, unless there's a board that looks that you can just look at it and it's not just like, how do I say it? I'll say this. I wouldn't think that the work has been done if you go and you look at a board and it's like, or senior leadership, and it's half black, half white. Like, it's like, nope, you missed it. You you didn't actually get to the thing. So the thing becomes, yes, there's a whole lot of solutions, but there's also one set of data that would actually represent it. So I'm curious from your standpoint, and I also just want to toss out this one thing that I'm curious about with you, and then like see where you want to take it. And the question that's on my mind is there a difference when you look to maximize inclusion versus maximizing diversity? Because right now it feels like the starting point is diversity, and the starting point is like, let's divide everyone up into various groups based on what we can see, you know, or based on like general groups of identity. And like it, I'll be honest with you, and it's probably part of the reason why this whole thing came up. It wasn't until 2016 that I felt I had to be a black man. Like, there was a lot of other, like, my entire life I've been I was always the statistic. I was the 2 to 3% of all people in this field are African American, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 2016 that I felt like I needed to be a black man. There was a lot going on in America where it felt like
Right.
that it's more important to also acknowledge this part of me.
And that's a huge burden on you.
Yeah, it's like it's an interesting thing to have to like, because up until then I was just Nemo, and that's like that to me is like the difference. It's like, and I can't have a conversation as just Nemo. Like right now, when we walk into any of these conversations or these things, it's not as an individual, or I don't know how to say it. It feels like it's as a collective group based on terms and definitions that are.
Yeah, well, I think what's happening, I think like our world is becoming more networked. Social media is enabling this. And I think what's happening is people are gaining more power, right? And like employees can literally just talk to each other now or organize socially, right? Like the Google walkout, regardless of what their issue is, would have just been really hard to happen 15 years ago, because workers couldn't coordinate as well, right? So you're seeing this across society too, and like people can organize, right? You see things like Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter. What was the movement with like the Constitution? I don't know, all these political movements, and like people just like show up at a park and suddenly there's like a few hundred people there, right? So this stuff is happening instantly. So I think you may just be seeing like a broader shift playing out in the workforce. And I think what makes it so icky is that people try to pretend that that hasn't happened. It's like, oh, we're still here and like trying to do great work and like build a great company culture. It's like these things are kind of seeping in. And I mean, one of the frameworks from political mindset that both parties are using right now is identity politics, and basically a ranking of like who's suffering the most, right? But that looks at people as groups. So it's a group, which groups suffer the most, right? So in the workplace, you are no longer Nemo. It's not a pluralistic notion of everyone has their unique story. It is you are this member of a group, right? So you no longer can relate to me through like our own troubles of working in the corporate world and like our own struggles with like who we're trying to be as men, and like we don't have that anymore because we're different groups, right? And I think that's some of the ickiness, but I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Because that's probably a broader shift. I think the problem with that is it divides people. It's highly effective for political movements, but it is not effective for finishing a PowerPoint deck, right? It's very effective for saying that person is our enemy and this will unite us, right? But like if you're starting to divide people and say, well, this person's this person's that, this person's needs more status, like how the hell do you, like what are we doing? Like we're just trying to finish this Excel model, right?
Yeah. So it's like, if I'm hearing you right here, it's like as these concepts from like our greater society and let's say politics in particular right now are becoming more prevalent and more, the word accessible is coming to mind. I don't know if that's actually the correct word, but it's now coming in and coming into the work context, and we're taking those similar notions and applying it and transforming it into our work environments. And if I'm getting you also right here, while those are effective outside, when you start applying it to just like trying to operate as a good team together, things start going off.
Well, I think they're good for understanding, right? It's good to understand that like being a white dude's easier in the US.
Is it good for understanding? Like because like that, because there's
I think the ideas in terms of like people have multiple like this is the whole thing. Like this is why the idea kind of undermines itself. People have multiple identities,
Yeah.
right? And you can have multiple identities which are all really tough, right? But everyone has them. Like we can't just pick the 3 or 4 categories. The
Yeah.
whole idea of multiple identities is that we have hundreds of them. Like we have our health crises, we have who our parents were, we have whether we're rich or poor, we have our whether you're like this is one that I kind of bring up to people to challenge people. Like pretty sure America prioritizes attractive people.
I,
Like
I,
why not have a hiring program for ugly people? Right? That makes people really uncomfortable, right?
oh, well, you should have told me that, Paul, because I'm gonna like now I got to pull that out. I'm like, I'm like, all right, let's do it. I
But
might,
we should, right? We should have a hiring program for short people. Like I looked around at my consulting firm one day and we had incredible diversity, people from all over the world. Such fascinating diversity. Everyone was like 6'4". I'm like, what the fuck is happening here?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
How is everyone so tall? I'm 6 feet tall,
yeah,
and I'm taller than like 90. I think it's like I looked up the stats. I'm taller than 82% of people in the U.S.
yeah,
And then everyone at this firm was taller than me.
yeah. How did that
It's
feel?
like
It's gotta be like, wait a minute, hold on. Something
right. So
like,
they're good for understanding, but what's happening, what I was saying about the politics is
yeah,
current politics is using it to like figure out who their base is along 3 or 4 simple dimensions. Like the Republican Party is saying like poor white dudes should get a better shot, right? The Democrats are picking different people, right? But then organizations are saying, all right, let's look at people as race, gender, and sexuality,
yeah.
right? Like I don't care what anyone's sexuality is. Like I want a diversity of like ideas when I'm working, right?
And it's just like,
Hopefully you have like a weird past too that's like way different than mine that like makes me be more creative as well.
like you're saying something here that like I would love to explore with you around how and the question in my mind is how could one organization flip that, like choose to do it differently, right? So I think when we get into looking at it from a broad perspective, then it's like we have to get into really large systemic changes, and sometimes you need to get like just the innovators that are in there right now that are saying, like, we honestly do believe that we want to do our business this way.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious if you've had any thoughts or if you've seen anything out there that's like, okay, because you had said something that stuck out to me. I just had a conversation, someone used the same thing, which is the words unique story. Like you can't have a unique story in a group. And what you just brought up right here is like, I would love to know about your past experience and
Yeah.
like it can like, hope we can use it. But like, in order to get to that, you must know their unique story, or that unique story must have a place. So I'd be really curious for you, because ultimately one of my goals is to be able to take these conversations that we're having here as we're exploring this, and to be able to just start modeling what a different set of conversations might look like, what a different set of experiences around this might look like, just in case people just don't know that like,
Yeah.
that there are other ways of approaching this here. So I'd be curious if there's like one thing, if we're gonna, how might you see it come into life in a different way?
Well, I think the conversation is key. I've always been the weirdo in that, like, I actually just love building relationships. So, like, I would use my time in organizations to do that and, like, deeply befriend people. I always ended up befriending the weirdest people at the companies, mostly because, like, I didn't hold, and this is another thing, like, right, is work at the center of our life. Are we workers first before humans? Um, I don't think so. I don't want to live my life thinking so either. So I would just have deep conversations with people. And when you dig deep and talk with people in a like human way, you get to connect with people and you relate to them. I think across diverse populations, the modern belief in the working world is that you can't show your humanity, right? Um, So I think it starts with like more conversations, more like safe space, not the safe space where nobody can say anything, but the safe space where people can say anything.
Hold on, real
Um,
quick. That just blows my mind, real quick. Not the safe space where no one can say anything, but the safe space where anyone can say anything.
yeah,
Really quickly, there's enough in there that we need to like pull that apart. Help me see the.
right. But yeah, I mean, I reflect back to a conversation I was having in my last company with somebody, and like we were just talking about like how things are so weird for us. We feel like such outsiders, um, and like she was from a very like different background than me, and very different than the norm in the company. Um, and it was a secretive conversation. It was just us. Like we had kind of found each other, right? And we weren't going to have that at a broader level, right? And this is a company that like claims to care about diversity and um, kind of just wants the metrics, doesn't really want to do the work. And I think that that's the distinction, right? This is hard. This is so hard. Building relationships is painful, and you're going to feel crappy sometimes. And like even your friends piss you off sometimes, right? That's why they're your friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And work should be filled with conflict sometimes, disagreements, like people challenging you, people pushing you to be better, right? And that's, I think, a lot of what this comes down to.
So if you had a bottom line for you, like what do you feel that it comes down to?
What do you mean in the organizational context?
In the organizational context here, because I'm enjoying our exploration of this here. And before we wrap up, I would love to like see like what do you think this all comes down to? Because and I'll let you know why I'm curious. I'm like I know this is just your opinion, so it's not like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to live on forever as like this is the end all be all. But I would love to explore this by like bringing people around to have a conversation around it, or to create different interventions and different experiences or conversations and dialogues to explore
Yeah.
this, or to know that I have to keep this bottom line in mind as we're trying different things out. Because if it's a solution that doesn't address the bottom line, then we can't actually move the needle, or we can't actually
Yeah.
say like this is a viable solution for long-term growth and in your organization and beyond. So I'll be really curious for you, like what do you think, if you had a bottom line, what's going on with what we need to be focusing on, or I don't know. I don't want to remove the power from the conversation, but if we had a bottom line, like this is where like we were able to put our attention onto this core area, and maybe it's shifting it away. People are thinking around it from a organizational standpoint. Maybe it's around first we need to create influential leaders versus hierarchical authoritative leaders, and change the shape of the way that leadership is experienced throughout the organization so that it can feel differently, and in which case relational leadership would make more sense and inclusion would happen naturally. Like I'm open to anything, but I'd be really curious what comes to mind.
Yeah. So I think you get good outcomes when you allow for experimentation to happen, right? However, I think the way work is structured, and even in many ways our culture in America, is we've optimized around personal freedom. But we're kind of left with a lot of unfairness because of that, right? It's better than the unfairness we had 100 years ago, but it still feels kind of shitty. So people want to fix that, right? And I think that intention is being expressed the wrong way. So the intention is to improve equality, bring about more fairness. That is a great intention. The actions, I think, are where things go off the rails. Top-down initiatives in big companies don't work because they don't think about second-order effects. And then to fix them, they add more initiatives, which add more complexity, which add more confusion, right? And you get more and more abstracted from what you're really trying to do. So I think what it comes down to for me is like, what is freedom? Like freedom of organizations to experiment, freedom of the individual in an organization. Like companies should define that. Like, are you really free in an organization, right? Are you free to speak or are you not? Like, if you're not, like, make it clear what you're not allowed to say and who's not allowed to say it. And maybe defining around this would really raise some like very clear discussions, right? But if like we give people freedom, we can also acknowledge that some people are free to opt out, right? It may be that men want to, like, one thing that always dumbfounds me is like, we have women opting out. Like, that is a bad thing. Maybe they're just way freaking smarter than the men. Like, I've opted out, you've opted out, the path sucks, right? Like, if we are free to opt out, like, we can't then try to cling to making these organizations equal, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No.
And I don't know if that's right. But I think I'd go back to, we need different firms experimenting in different ways, and being able to share those ideas openly and freely.
Mm-hmm. So my brain is just exploring some of these things here. No, because I really like the merits of like being able to experiment, and, like, you know, being able to share openly and freely. And I really appreciate you, Paul, being willing to like just jump on this conversation with me here, because I think part of the reason why I'm trying to do this here, not trying, I'm effectively doing it in this moment, is to have us be able to share more openly, have us be able to share more freely, have the opportunity to understand more about what we're thinking and and how we're seeing this complex system. And the way I describe it to people is, I'm like, look, no one knows the solutions to this. Like no one has gotten it right. You know, there are companies that are doing better than others. There are societies that are doing differently, better than others, sure. But this is, in a lot of ways, still a burgeoning field. You know, we are on the frontier of everything still with this here. You know, and so I think it's really important that we continue to have that experimentation, and we continue to try and hypothesize, define, share, and really also make sure that we're solving for the right problems. That we're solving for the right problem. There's a thing in my mind that like I call it like the Martian test, and you brought it up with the frogs and butterflies. But it's like the Martian test to me is like, if a Martian landed here tomorrow, like, and wanted to, and let's talk about workplace here. It's then like, let's keep it within that context, but wanted to like work within one of our organizations, what would need to be in place for this Martian in order to feel included. And if you can figure that out, then all the rest of it will fall. In my mind, I'm like,
he's got to get a degree first, right?
Pardon?
He's got to go to college first, right?
Yeah, that's it, right? That's where it comes from. You know all the steps. You know all the steps there. Cool.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. I like that experiment. Maybe you should definitely use that if you're giving a talk around that. I think that'd be interesting.
Okay.
It's also making me realize something is like, so I would recommend looking at the McKinsey Women in the Workplace reports from like 2016 to 2017 to 2018 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Like the tone of them changed dramatically. And I think what's happening is that like what's getting talked about is just being in response to like the political narratives that are dominating. And nobody's agreed on like any certain definitions of what's just trying to be done, right? So in 2017, the McKinsey report basically compared like men and women at different levels of the organization. And it showed like men are like leaving for the same reasons women are, but at slightly lower rates, right? So to me, it was like, I'm looking at that like, oh wow, there's something there. Because like I knew I was going to opt out of the path, right? And like I don't know, I like all my mentors and leaders have been women. Like I want to work for a woman leader or like a good man if I can find one. But I just want to work for like a good person. I want the people that are staying to opt out instead of the good people that are opting out, right?
Yeah.
The men and women. I just want good people with good principles to lead these organizations.
So that there, right there. And I just make sure here, Paul, as we wrap up. First, when you say opt out, you mean leave the workforce, right? Leave the employment.
Full-time employment of
okay,
like
cool.
Large organizations.
Okay. All right, cool. So it's like they can go off to be entrepreneurs, they can go off to do different things in life, they can go travel, they can be writers, all that, but like they're just out of like the standard like labor force of full-time employment. That's opting out, correct?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Just want to make sure that we were on the same page around that. And there's something really important about what you just said to me. It's like I remember there was a time where there was an organization that I ended up leaving, and there was a time where I realized I was like, oh, like I'm not, the A team is no longer playing here. The A team has gone off somewhere. I don't know where they went, but like I just looked around. I was like, wait a minute, where did they go?
Right.
And that was part of my indication to also start looking elsewhere. But it's an interesting.
Yeah, like I want to write a report like closing the gender gap, getting more men to raise children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Just think about that as a thought experiment. Like if we're all in the like business of building a better world, like. Is that better than getting more women to stay in the workforce and rise the corporate ladder?
I think it's a really interesting question. And it's funny.
I want to be in, like, if I have kids, I want to be an active parent.
Yeah. And the way that my life is being, the way that I'm constructing my life right now, I'm going to be the one that's at home. And so it's just really funny to me when you brought it up. I was like, it was just something I hadn't even like really thought of, because it was also just like the reality of the life that I was living. It's like the lens was too close,
Yeah. Do you enjoy your path?
I mean, I'm ecstatic with what I'm building here.
But in the reports, you're portrayed as a flaw with the system.
Interesting.
I'm not. I like me leaving, the way the reports are portrayed actually makes the stats that people are arguing around look better. You leaving makes them look worse.
Interesting. That's right. I can see that.
And we're both happy.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. We this is gonna have to be a continued conversation, Paul. I think that there's something here that's really important. I think and a lot of what I want to try and I can see is like one of my motives with all of this stuff here. It's like we do need a set of leaders out there that are thinking about this differently. Like I used to go around. I'm like, you know what? I feel that in 20 years, like a lot of the inclusion issues we have right now, maybe it's 2 generations in the workplace. There's going to be a lot of work that's going to be done beforehand, but the children and the people that are growing up right now, like they're just going to approach things differently. When you and I and our counterparts and our peers are the leaders of organizations, they're going to do things differently.
Right.
So there's an element that's like, I think we're kind of caught in legacy approaches, and we're trying to fix problems that were in from past models. And part of the reason why we're having this conversation, it's like, because I can say, rather than fixing a model that's no longer appropriate for us right now, what might the next model look like? And just build that, because
and I think it starts from a life perspective, right? If you look at the Nordics, like they're seen as a very free society, but what's happened in the workplace is women opt out more because they have like a basic standard of living like more easily available. So like what kind of societies and lives are we trying to build? I think perhaps that is the fundamental question.
Ooh, okay. I love I love getting down to fundamental questions here and being able to go from that because I just like the surface level questions don't excite me because always another variation of of someone's like experience on it, right? It's like if we can get down to the core things that regardless of what's happening on the surface level, if we've gone deep enough that we can have a real conversation around things that transcend any of the first order of diversity and inclusion, then we can actually get to a place where everyone can come to the table and speak more freely. So I'm going to do this, Paul. Let's wrap up this conversation here, right? And if you're ever interested here, I'll let you know right now. I could talk to you about this kind of stuff for a bit here. So like, would love to engage in another conversation at a later time, and just as both of our work continues to expand, I'd love to continue to grow with that. I'm not sure if this will ever be released. Like, I just wanted to make sure that me and you were having a conversation. If it is though, is there like any contact information or anything you'd like to share? Anything that you want to share around your platform? If not, like that's fine too. I just wanted to make sure that I give you the opportunity in case you are interested.
So my podcast has just shifted recently to a new title called Reimagine Work. And you can check that out at think-boundless.com. But I think that gets to what I am passionate about, which is how do you reimagine work to fit into a life that matters? And that's really the fundamental question that drives me. And I don't have the answers. I have no idea where this curiosity is going to lead me, but that seems to be a question worth pondering rather than like, how do we create meaningful work? Or how do we build a good culture at work, right? I think we need to fundamentally reimagine how we're thinking about these things. And we're stuck in old models. And I want to help us move forward, not back.
I love it. I love it. I, like, as you say that, it's like it's shining even more of a light as to why I get so excited every time me and you talk. Like the podcast that I'm working on now is called Pioneers, Outliers, and Mavericks, and it is exactly this here. You're asking a different fundamental question. Like that's the key. It's like we're solving the wrong problems, and you're like, I'm not. And I really want to just like acknowledge you for being the pioneer in this here. We don't have the answers yet. We don't have the answers yet. And it's exactly. One of those things later on where it's like later on people will come and talk about the work that you've done, the work that I've done, the work that other people out here are doing right here. But like no one's right yet, and we're only ever going to be right based on like the 7+ billion or maybe 8+ at some point, with the 7+ billion people on the earth at this current time. There's no like overarching right or wrong. But I just really want to acknowledge you for doing the work and for being one of the people that are willing to pull our world and elevate our world into a new place. So thank you, Paul.
Good stuff. I appreciate your time too, Niiamah.
Awesome. I will talk again soon.
All right. See you, man.